My name's Cait and I'm an interaction design major. So my piece is a speculative design piece. It's looking at the future of food production in the year 2080. So through a series of interviews with people throughout the food supply chain, so growers, agronomists, all the way through to consumers, I've co-designed the foods of the future. So we used an artificial intelligence system called DALL-E 2, and we made visuals together, and then each of my interview participants chose which food they wanted to have featured in the exhibition, and they kind of gave some descriptions of how this food would have been developed in the future. So then I'm physically making those in felt, and they're going into this speculative piece that's a child's play scene. So you know those play kitchens that children have for dramatic play? So it's a supermarket of that, and people at the exhibition can handle the fruits, they can scan a QR code that's on the tags of them, and they can listen to the interview participants who design the foods talking about the challenges that our food supply system is going to face over the next 60 or so years. So that comes from, we've got this big challenge of how do we feed more people with less land, less water and less inputs in a changing climate.
So kind of like an interactive learning thing, but which could apply to both like kids and as well as like educate adults as well, right?
That's it, yeah. It's probably more targeted at adults, but it's still very playful that children would naturally want to play with it. But I'm hoping to tap into that playful nature of adults as well, hoping to engage them in play, and in doing so kind of create this feeling of a little bit of discomfort, because at first you're looking at this piece going, oh, it's a cute children's set, it's a cute play toy, but then when you listen to it and you start listening to the challenges that we're going to face in our food system, it should feel a little bit unsettling and a little bit thought-provoking and making you think about, well, what's my impact in shaping this food system? Because as consumers, we do have a huge ability to shape what goes into our food systems, and I really want people to be able to realise that. So most of my work throughout uni, wherever there's been space, has centred around sustainability, and I've looked at either fibre production or food production. So I recently started working in the agricultural industry and just loved it, fell in love with everything that's happening in that space. And I went to a morning breakfast at a group called Agribusiness Futures, or AgriFutures Australia, and they posed that question, they posed that challenge to everyone present. How are we going to feed more people with less land, less water and less inputs? And it just really struck me, and I thought it would become quite an interesting space to explore. So that was kind of the seed of the idea, and then bringing in that, trying to get that ludic aspect, but also trying to get that speculative design aspect into it. So, yeah. So it was definitely a bit of a challenge getting people to engage with the co-creation aspect of it. So I set it up as a structured interview to start with, and so I got people thinking about the future of food production, and then I had kind of a structured co-design session as part of that. So I would get them to imagine a future food and answer a series of prompts, and then I would introduce them to the artificial intelligence system DALL-E 2, and I explained to them, like, you know, this is the computer kind of helping us to visualize what we're imagining. We don't have much control over it in terms of what the output's going to be, but we can change what we put in as inputs, and that will change our outputs. And I tried to really make it a fun experience, so I tried to make the interview experience and the co-design aspect more fun than serious. And I actually found participants really enjoyed it. So as we started to generate the images, they were blown away by the technology, as was I. It's just wild what we can do with something like artificial intelligence. But we just really got into, through a few iterations of the designs, we'd say, oh, like, this is really fun, like, what if we changed this about the prompt? And people got quite into it. And it was nice because it took away a lot of the pressure that's associated with a lot of traditional co-design tools. So things like collage or drawing, they really have this art making aspect that people can find daunting, because we have such a strong understanding of what we think is good art. And so at the start of almost every interview, my participants were like, I'm not a creative person, like I don't know about making stuff. And I would say, you don't need to worry about any making in this. I'm not going to make you draw. I'm not going to make you physically make anything. The computer's going to help us do that. And it really took the pressure out of it for them. I think for me, this project, it's very research heavy, and I really wanted to get deeper into the agricultural industry, into our food systems and how they work, and get more of an understanding from the inside. So I'm really hoping to kind of potentially see this as a work that's ongoing. I'm looking into potentially furthering this project through maybe a master's, or looking at different opportunities there are to bring in agriculture into ag tech space, seeing if I can combine those things and extend the project. But it was very much about trying to get a deeper understanding of the agricultural industry, because it's the space I want to work in. Yeah, absolutely. So agriculture was my starting point, but I really wanted to take a systems thinking approach and look at the entire food supply chain, food system. So part of my interviews, I was able to interview a couple of food technologists. So they'd worked in hospitality and were now working in the design of food products. So they gave me a real lot of insight of how much goes in between our food before we're eating it at a restaurant or buying it at a supermarket. How much of, especially our processed foods or our recipes, are very designed. And it's definitely, I've discovered it's an area they're working hard on. So a lot of the work that both food technologists were doing, they were looking at how they can use products that wouldn't be acceptable for sale in the supermarket, because they don't quite meet the visual aspects that we as shoppers look for. So they're looking at, well, how can we take these waste foods and turn them into slightly preserved foods that we can sell? And then absolutely, like looking at restaurateurs, looking at how we can shorten our supply chains is one of the big findings that came out of the research. So growers, consumers, the food technologists, agronomists, everyone was curious about how can we shorten that food supply chain and make it more local. So absolutely, sourcing locally, if that can be encouraged, would be a great outcome for this project. So probably one of the biggest challenges I faced was having those physical felt foods, having them so that they could be accessed by people at an exhibition and linked to the information. So I explored a lot of different technologies to do that. I looked into using camera scanning technology and augmented reality to display it in the space. I had a lot of issues with the augmented reality recognizing my images, like recognizing my foods. So I trained a machine learning model to recognize my foods, and I got that working. But then I was reliant on a lot of coding to get the augmented images of the foods to center correctly on the camera once it had recognized the foods. And so I kind of hit this point where it was beyond my coding ability. And so I really had to go, okay, well, what am I going to do? It's still really important that people can access the recordings, that they can access the foods, but am I overcomplicating this with a technology that doesn't need to be in the project? So it was kind of hard to abandon that, because I spent a good 3 weeks getting that to work. But then I realized, well, even if I went with that, people would have to download an app to use it, which is a barrier to them experiencing the piece. So I looked at, well, what technology exists that's simple that people know how to use? And obviously one that we've adopted during COVID was QR codes. So I looked at customizing QR codes and kind of iron-on transfer onto fabric, onto tags of the toys. And so that was kind of my workaround, but it ended up being this nice way to work with it, because you didn't have to have an app. You could use your own device. You didn't have to use a device. So it kind of ended up simplifying. It took away a lot of potential future problems that would have happened in the project. So if you'd like to learn more about my project, you can check out futuresuper.design, or if you'd like to see more of my previous work or get in contact with me, you can go to caithopper.design. Thank you.